business, but at the end of the day, if I'm unwilling to receive the gift of feedback and respond to it, then the MBA did me no good, and I'll still be frustrated. And if I'm not willing to go the extra mile at work, the MBA did me no good, and so then the MBA, under those circumstances, might not be worth it. So I did read an article in Harvard Business Review about self-awareness, and and it's very interesting. I guess these journeys, everybody kind of goes through these journeys, and they have the example of a bank CEO who had great results. The numbers look real good. Who measure everything, right? No different from his company, and they did a survey around employee engagement, and they were in the toilet. Does any of that sound familiar? And so, try to, initially, as leaders, we get a little defensive. It's like, what do you mean? My people don't like working for me. What do you mean? And so after we get over ourselves and we put our egos in check, then we can start to understand. And one of the things that he had to acknowledge was he was leading with his head and not with his heart. Do you care about the people that are in the organization that work for you? Without the people in the organization, as a leader, can't be successful. And so that's the other piece that I just want to make sure that I throw in there is, the self-awareness. What is it? What is it? Am I aware of the impact that I have on people? Am I aware of how my leadership styles affects my effectiveness? Am I really open to new ideas, or do I just say that? And how do I show up, and what does that look like? So that's just another piece I just wanted to make sure I add. And before I close my part, again, when I look at the value of the MBA, for me, it was worth it. I had the opportunity to build the skills. My engineering degree, it added a lot of value. It provided a different kind of credibility. It lets me flex those analytical quant things that I like to do. But as I mentioned, the MBA gave me the credibility such that I could pursue a career in finance, because that's something that I wanted to do. Had I not done it, I don't think that I would have gotten the interview and I would have gotten the opportunity. But I'd say for me, engineering, the finance, experience, leadership, and relationships have been keys to my success. And one of the things, when you think about it from an entrepreneurial perspective, a great idea is a great idea. But if you can't monetize that idea, then it's of low value. So, is it worth it to you? Can I answer any questions for people who may be thinking about it? Yes, sir.
Hi. So a lot of times when you think of MBA, you conflate it with a lot of things, a lot of preconceived notions. You think it will teach you all these leadership management skills, clearly. So what does it not include that some people might think it does? What are the technical skills? Like you mentioned, reflection, self-awareness is not something that comes with it. What else?
You have to be, if that's what you're looking for, there are two things. One, you need to choose a program that focuses on that part. Some of it's the leadership and the management. And sometimes, when you're on campuses, you'll see workshops or webinars or seminars, and you have to seek those things out. In a lot of the standard MBA programs, as I mentioned, those things aren't included. Leadership, you can read about it in a book, but at some point you've got to practice it. So that may be leading the finance club or leading a fundraiser. So there are a number of ways that you can pursue these things, but at the end of the day, and that's why the experience component is key. And a lot of people in MBA programs are between the ages of 25 and 32. So in that age range, they don't expect you to have 10 years of work experience, but you need some, so you can figure out, well, how does it show up? Am I able to put some of the things in practice that I went to? The easy thing to teach is the skill. And it goes back to why you're doing it. If you're doing it from a leadership perspective, make sure you choose a program that's going to get you what you want. Yes, ma'am, and then.
Thank you. What's the benefit of getting an MBA like a couple years after your undergrad versus getting it, say, 10 or 12 years down the line?
We'll go back to why you're doing it. And that's the truth, because again, you want to have some years of work experience. Because I'm going to use kind of a religious-based example. We can read the Bible every day. We can read the same patches of scripture, and we can walk away with two different messages. Why is that? Were the words different? No, they were exactly the same. But what we bring to that in our life's experiences, and what conversations that we may have can be something completely different. Because I read the same scripture 10 years ago and I read it today, and based on what experiences I've had in those two periods of times, it'll hit me sometimes completely differently. And so I go back to, it depends on what it is you're looking for. And that's why the work experience is key. You don't have, the hard part about 10 years is typically 10 years in, you've got mortgage, you got a car note, and so you've got to plan for those things. And sometimes it's a little harder when you've got more bills, versus at 25 or 27, it's easier to make the decision not to move down that path. Otherwise, you got to save enough money so that you can cover that. So here in the back.
I was going to ask you about the value of the network, the point that you're bringing up. So for me personally, was initially I thought like, oh, maybe a couple of years in PECO, and then walk out and do a full-time MBA. But once you start working and you like the industry, you like the company, you like what you do, it's more about like how much network of the school itself is going to add value in addition to that MBA. So it again falls in to what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So if I want to grow as a leader, like how much, because there are two school of thoughts, like they're like, oh, M7, like Columbia, like Harvard, Wharton, you have to be there and then you're a leader. And there is a different school of thought that says, like Mark Cuban, he says you don't even need an MBA, right? Like it's what you want in your life. So how much does network matter in terms of growing as a leader or doing well in a profession?
Yeah, so I'd say early in your career, it's probably, networks are always valuable because they help create opportunities. So let me say that. Early in your career, you know, we're comparing our experiences about how I might approach some things. And that doesn't change. It's just as you move up in the organization, that gets broader. And so the questions get more complicated. And depending on what it is that you want to do, you know, if I want to make some different moves, do I have a network outside of the Exelon family that I can leverage to make a different move? Now, I'm not encouraging you to leave Exelon. However, you know, let's just be honest. We're trying to have an honest conversation here. So it depends on what it is you're trying to do. Having networks outside of the company also kind of helps frame and set the stage for how am I looking at this? Am I just looking at it, you know, in a narrow way? Because if I talk to my best friend, she went back to school full time. So she was a consultant, no husband, no kids. She rented her house out that she owned, and she went to Kellogg full time. And it was great. And she wanted to do finance, and she did it at a different level than I did. So I saw how that can be done, but she was very deliberate in that. I mean, she saved enough money to pay cash for her tuition. She didn't. She's very strategic. She took a loan out because she said, well, what if I get a job offer and they offer to pay off my student loans and I don't have any? So she wanted to have something to horse trade. Because at the end of the day, she did. She got an offer for a company and they paid about half her student loans, and then the rest of it, she just took what she saved to pay the rest of it off. So, you know, it kind of worked out. But like I said, there are different perspectives. Having a network like Kellogg, you know, you can pull from a much broader, much more influential base. And some of the conversations are a little bit differently. So the things that we debated when I was in B school around some of the business cases that we worked, that was a small piece of my education process. Probably my last 2 semesters or 2 quarters in school, we really did that. At Kellogg, that's all they did. I mean, they learned the accounting and the finance and how to do cash flow and balance. They learned that kind of along the way, kind of like at night. Yeah. But what they really focused on were the business cases, like what's the practical application and how do I look at a problem and how do I solve it? And it's a different style of learning. It's probably more similar to my Georgia Tech career, educational career, versus at Georgia State, which was more tactical and skill building. But again, for me, if I had to do it over again, I don't know if I would have done it much differently. I may have chosen Emory versus Georgia State, but But at the end of the day, my purpose was to get the skills so that I could start pursuing a career in finance. And Georgia State was the fastest path to get me there. So it just depends on what you want your network to do for you. So it's not one answer. In the back and then in the merit.
In your career path, have you ever gone up against, let's say, another candidate who had a lesser degree or perhaps no degree at all and was selected over your MBA? And how did that make you feel? And also, being a manager director, how much does that weigh in your decision of someone, a candidate, having a degree compared to the same scenario? How much does that weigh?
So I'm not aware that with most of the roles that I competed for, that someone without a degree or without an MBA got it. I'm not aware of any that I can think of. However, in terms of, let's just acknowledge that people who have degrees have a bias towards people with degrees. Is that always the case? No. Have you read the bio of Chris Crane? Everybody know who he is, right? He's like the top guy at Exelon. Well, he has a 2-year technical degree, and he came up the ranks in the nuclear organization. And he ultimately ran the whole nuclear organization. He was responsible for the turnaround and the efficiency, and the outage time went from 90 days to 20 days. I mean, he had a lot of responsibility in making that happen, and now he's the president of Exelon. Keep in mind, our previous president, very accomplished, he had a law degree. So not only did he have an undergrad, he had he had JD, right? So I'm not going to tell you it doesn't happen, but I'd rather stack the chips in my favor, and that's been my approach. Everybody has to walk their own walk, but my approach is, let me not make it harder than it needs to be. If I need to go to the degree to make that box, just check that box so I don't have to have that conversation, then that's been my approach. What I find as far as advancement at Georgia Power, at Merit, at Exelon.
Please leave a message for.
Okay. Has really been about experience. Because at a point, it's not just about the skills, but as you move up, the leadership component becomes much more valuable. Like, how are you leading the organization? Are you able to deliver results? It's easy at a point to do it yourself, but as you move up in the organization, you have to rely on other people because you can't be an expert in everything, and there are only 24 hours in the day, and so you need everybody to do their part. And how do you engage the organization? How do you lead the organization? And you can't lead by yourself. If nobody's following, you're not a leader, you're an individual contributor. So as you move up in an organization, one of the things I've observed, and I've received feedback from mentors across the organization, inside and out, it really becomes about leadership. Larry.
How did you manage your time, and were there any outside influences that could have possibly gotten in the way?
When I did my MBA, it was easy for me. I had no husband, no kids. I had a boyfriend, and I'm going to tell you, it was kind of funny. He was about 10 years older than me, and in the beginning, like, all my time was his, right? And then I go back to school, and he's like, "Well, can we go out tonight?" I'm like, "I gotta study." Are you cooking dinner tonight? Nope, got class. And so the funny thing is I influenced him to go back and get his MBA. So he ended up, since he was more senior, he went and got an executive MBA, so it's a little different for him. But so I influenced him to go back to school. So when I was studying, he was studying. And so we ended up spending more time together in that regard. But, there were things at church and things in my sorority that's like, "Well, can you do?" It's like, "Nope, I'm in school. I'll be out in 2 semesters." They didn't forget. In 2 semesters, they call me. "You graduated now, right?" "Yep." "Can you come on and go do ABCXYZ?" So for me, I made the decision at a time when I didn't have a lot of responsibilities. It was just me and my dog. And so it was easier for me to do. So I could go and work 40, 50 hours a week at work and take 2 or 3 classes at night and get it all done. And I didn't have family that I was neglecting. I didn't have children that I had to make some different decisions about, and what do I go to and what not. But while I was in school, my boss, one of my managers, he was also in school, and at Georgia Power, they paid you based on how you did in the class. So if you got an A, they paid for 100%. You got a B, they paid for 90%. You got a C, they paid for 80%, and they didn't pay for less than that. And so his approach was, he had a wife and a son, and he said, if I'm getting A's in the class, then I'm not spending enough time with my family. So some of those things, we got to make some decisions about ourselves. And so it becomes a personal value. So you can either get done in 2 years, or you can get done in 3 years. That becomes a personal choice about how you make that juggle work. Because like I said, if you've got a family, that becomes another component that you've got to factor in. What do I do with my time? Because when you go to school, the whole family goes to school with you. Because everybody's got to do something a little bit different. But thank you for your question. Any other questions? Anybody else want to share how they made the decision to go back to get their MBA? Because I know I had a few in the room.
I'll share. I wanted to learn, like you, I have an engineering degree, undergrad, and I just wanted to learn the language of the other side of the business. I've found in my career, especially in utilities, very siloed. We don't know what the business folks do. Business folks don't know what the engineers are doing. So I kind of looked at it as learning another language, being able to speak the language of the finance and business side, and translate it to the engineers, and vice versa.
Yep.
That's what drove me to do it. And she is right. Do it like she did it before you have kids and before marriage and all that. I did the exact opposite. So.
I mean, people do it every day.
Yeah.
Somebody on the line, I think, had a question.
Yeah, I have a question regarding, you started as an engineer and then are now working in finance after you got your MBA. And do you have any recommendations for how you make that transition, going from a technical career into something that's more business related?
So the truth of the matter is I never worked as an engineer. So, when I finished Georgia Tech, I did have a degree in engineering, but I started they had a professional development program where they weren't really doing a lot of hiring, and they were doing some very select targeted hiring because they were concerned about the aging workforce. And so they wanted to do some targeted hiring because they hadn't really done any hiring in like 5 years. And so like, oh my goodness, we might have a gap. And so I had the opportunity to spend time in power plants. I was out in substations, distribution and transmission substations. I had an opportunity to do some things in customer operations. I worked on some rate case, doing some analysis in the finance area with that, and I had time to spend time in marketing. So at Georgia Power, new business was in marketing. Now I worked very closely with the distribution engineers, and so, the fact that I had an engineering degree was very helpful because I could help them prep all my plans so that I could move my projects a little bit further down the road, especially because, customers, they always call you, 2 months in advance exactly when they're supposed to, right? Yeah, no, never. And so sometimes, especially with clients that they're going to have more repeat business, you want to kind of move them down the path. And so, I was able to help move my stuff a little bit further down the path a little bit more quickly because I could leverage my engineering experience to do all the prep work for them to kind of accelerate it down the process. The stuff that they didn't want to do, I was able to do that for some of my customers, my new business customers. So I never truly worked as an engineer. So if you look at my